Yes!
That video has 36 million views. It's the most viral stone lift of all time, and
Wow.
it just goes to show, don't give up. I didn't give up there. I could have, I almost did, but I didn't. And sometimes when you're almost ready to give up, you're feeling your lowest is right when the breakthrough is around the corner. So many people think that we fall apart once we hit 30. And I actually believed that for a while until I just said, no, that's not the case. I'm not going to let that happen. I plan to move better at 35 than I do at 30. I plan to move better at 40 than I do 35. That's my mentality. That's my goal. I'll do good mornings or lunges or Bulgarian split squats, standing ab wheel, bicep curls with fat grips, all of that, Turkish get-ups. So many things I can think of as assistance exercises to prepare my body for what I'll have to do with stones. But at the end of the day, lifting a stone is way different than lifting a barbell, no matter how you do it. It's going to train your body in different ways. I feel like people think that I'm not aware that I can hurt myself, and they feel the need to tell me that I can hurt myself or I'm going to hurt myself. That can happen with anything. Lifting stones, playing soccer, anything. Regardless of the risks involved, do it if you can. You really have the ability and resources to do it. Doing what you love doing is going to make you happy. Therefore, you're happy, you're mentally more healthy. A man named John Sigelski once traveled the world lifting historical stones. However, for his own mission, he traveled state by state, pinning his own stones so that people from all around could go and lift these.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Progress Guaranteed podcast, where we discuss how interesting experts make progress. My guest today is John Sigelski. Instagram handle, travel, lift stones, repeat. He lifts heavy-ass stones for fun. We're going to learn how lifting heavy-ass stones and objects can benefit your life. Follow John on Instagram, and thanks for subscribing to the pod. So, John, I first became aware of you from your Insta-famous lift for the 100-year-old, 400-pound Cloghiem stone. And some things really stood out to me in that. One, you weren't a massive person. No offense. Right? Yeah. You're stacked, but, big dude lifting big stones. I didn't see you like that. And that piqued my interest. The next was that the actual lift that you did was extremely technical. It just wasn't this big, round, perfectly spherical object. It was, I saw you doing pivots and going off to the left and really interesting things. I thought you were going to crush your knees at some point, quite interestingly. And lastly, what truly brought me joy in watching that video was just your friends just screaming at you. That for some reason was, I didn't realize lifting a rock could be so joyous, right? And just the simplicity of that act made me very curious about you. So can you share the story of that famous stone lift and how it felt to accomplish that?
Absolutely. So pretty much I'll start off with the history of that stone. It's a quick little story. It is called the John Coffey Stone, aka Clare Stone. It is located in Clareglens, Tipperary County, Ireland. And the story goes that a man named John Coffey would lift a flagstone up on Clare Bridge. And men from all around the country would come on Sundays to try to lift the stone, but only John Coffey was strong enough to do it. And I think, like you said, the joy of all my friends there cheering me on was huge. I personally think that is what made that video blow up the way it did, was one, the energy from everyone screaming and getting excited, but two, just the powerful Irish. There's something about the Irish accent, the Irish power, the Irish energy that just brings forth something positive. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that, let me tell you, if you see me in that video and you see a guy who's on top of the world, feels on top of the world, I should say. If you would have known me or seen me a few hours before that, you would have never in a million years thought I would be doing what I was doing. The trip wasn't starting off exactly like I'd planned, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I know you wanted to touch up a little bit on the style of lifting that stone.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
That was very unique.
Yeah, I was actually telling the fellas there that, so typically I can walk up to a stone. Not typically, I usually walk up to every stone and I can look at it and I know how I'm going to approach it and how I'm going to lift it. And the same went with this one. I attempted the lift the exact way that I had anticipated I would have to. I'm not a small guy, like you said. I'm 5'7", 165 pounds, 75 kilograms, I think that is. I had to take a bit of a unique approach to it. I couldn't get my arms around it, but I had grips. So I knew that I was going to have to kind of slide it forward, grab it where I did, do a little lift off the ground, and quickly pivot left, which I know a lot of people look at that and think, oh my God, that is sketchy. And I can see why that would appear that way. The good thing about that is when I twist my spine in that direction, a lot of the weight is actually already rested on my knees. So I'm not having anti-lateral force actually pushing against my spine in a lateral motion, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Now, the initial way to get it that way is a little tough. You do have to throw in a little anti-lateral force, which I train in the gym with other exercises. But like you said, that stone got not only be strong, but it's a very technical lift. And I knew that when I got there. I told the guys, this is going to be a very technical, technique-dependent stone. You're going to have to be precise. And yeah, I think just from years of training my body with unconventional strength training and teaching myself spatial awareness and proprioception, I just am aware of where my body is at any given moment. I know if my left ankle feels like it's about to be unstable and I can shift it consciously. I know if my right ankle is going to feel that way. I know if I have to switch my elbow like this or have it like this. It's all about being aware of your own body. And that's just something that has come with time, years and years of training in the gym. I would say Turkish get-ups are my favorite exercise. And I think that has done a lot for me.
And how did it feel to hold, I guess it's 403 pounds I read online. How does it feel to hold a 403-pound stone up and hug it like it was your child, I guess?
Brought me back to life that day. It was, I mean, I've lifted heavier, but that was one of the more challenging stones because just the movement it required. It was an amazing feeling. That freak out I had at the end, that was all too real. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I try to keep myself calm, cool, collective, and humble in the moment, but it was just such an amazing feeling. I could only hold back so much. I felt, in that moment, I felt unstoppable, which I know none of us are. But to me, in that moment, I just felt like it.
You look like it. And, you know, the other thing that stood out to me was your outfit. Because I find your suspender outfit, it's just super unique. You're just seeing this dude lift heavy ass stones. Dude, you're only 165 pounds?
Yep. I'm a little guy. I am definitely on the smaller side.
So to me, this you made the entire podcast for me because I weigh 177 and I'm 5'8". So now you've given me true hope that I can lift heavy shit. I don't typically lift heavy shit because I think it doesn't feel as good on my joints, but that's what I wanted to sort of discover with you in terms of how you sort of architected your body like that. But your friends, tell me about your friends. I wish I could just hire them as a hype crew. They should think about that as a business. Real talk. Like if I had disposable income, I would just call them and be like, yo, y'all just come. Y'all send me recording just screaming at me because the energy that they created was so beautiful to match what you were doing. I thought that was fun. But yeah, tell me about those guys that you were with.
John, come on. Let's kiss
Right.
it, John.
They made that trip far greater than I had anticipated. I made new friends in another country. like you said, everyone could use a hype team like that. They should make their own business. I actually told them, make your own business and call it Hup Ya Boya, because that's what we scream to each other. You got, in that video, there was 5 people. You could hear 3 of them. So you probably saw David Keown in the background. He was behind me. He was the guy with the green, he had the hat, green shorts, glasses, and his arms were crossed. He's known as Kungslena Stones on Instagram. He is a legend over in Ireland. He actually has single-handedly recovered all of those lost stones in Ireland.
Wow.
Only within the past 2-3 years. There's 43 confirmed right now. And Lord only knows how much longer we had for him to go find them before they were lost forever. Because a lot of the people that know about them are very old. Mm-hmm. And other ones that knew about them are long gone now. So if it wasn't for him, they could have been lost forever. You got Tiernan Canny. He's the one in the behind saying, "Holy shit, John! Holy fuck, John!" And then you got my friend Andy. He's going, "Go on, John. You got this. Roll in." Stuff like that. And then there was Connor and Colin. Colin recorded me from another angle. Connor, I don't know if you could hear him in that video, but he has actually helped them find another lost stone recently. So David Keown, Kungslena Stones, has found most of them. Tiernan and Andy have found a couple, and Connor found another. And they're just great. I would love to go back there and see them all again, lift some more stones. Because, 1, they're going to keep finding more. Mm-hmm. But 2, there are many more there that I didn't have time to go lift. So I'll be making another trip out there.
So let me understand it. These people are just walking around Ireland, finding stones to lift. This is just an activity. We walk around, we find a big stone, and we go and lift it. That's anything more than that?
Yes and no. To 99% of the Earth's population, these are just stones. But
yes,
to the small percentage, which is less than 1 of us stone lifters, they call them, there are historical lifting stones. And these are very specific stones. They are almost historical landmarks in these countries. Ireland, Scotland, Iceland, Sweden, Japan, Faroe Islands. And these specific landmarks have their own stories and history to them. Some of the stories are true. Others are just myths and legends. I can give you an example of both. A stone that's just a legend, or at least us mere mortals would assume it's a legend, is the Cloughundra, aka the giant stone in Ireland. It's a heavy stone. It's 414 pounds, 188 kilograms. And the legend goes that there was a giant that would grab the stone and throw it like a grown man would throw a pebble. And the fingerprints of the giant are actually imprinted in the stone. And you could see them when you grab onto it. And it's a heavy stone. I mean, he would grab it like a football, just like we'd throw a pebble. Stories that would be true, more realistic, are, let's use the anchor stones, the Carna anchor stones, for example. These are some lighter stones, still pretty heavy for your average person, but they're lighter for someone who likes to lift stones often. These stones will be used to wrap rope around on boats and hold a boat down while whoever was on the boat did what they had to do on the land. Or some stones would be used as a test of strength for fishermen in order to get a specific job on a boat. There would be... Iceland has what's called the Dredvig stones in Dupalsander Beach. I probably butchered the name. There's 4 stones. One is 54 pounds. The next biggest is 119. One after that's 220, and the one after that's 339. Now, the thing with these ones is they're very smooth. Glass smooth. And God forbid if they're wet, but you're going to want to bring chalk, and you have to have that strong wrist cupping strength, even for the 220. So they're marked Amlodi, which is the smallest. That means you're a weakling or useless. You have half Dredvig, which means you're a half carrier, and that would get you a job as an oarsman on a boat. You have half Sturker, which means you're half strong, or you're half of a man. And then you have Fullsterker, which is actually my tattoo right here. And that means full strong in Icelandic.
Okay. That's damn cool. What is the technical definition of stone lifting? If I went to look it up.
I would say explain what you mean by the technical definition.
So technical meaning, how would you describe? Because I don't want to belittle the art. Is where I'm really trying to go. You know, it's not just picking up a big heavy rock. It is probably, as you're saying, the history, the legend. Now, if I go attempt this supposedly historic monument type thing, or moving this monument, I can now become a part of history, and it's sort of interacting. It's almost like a live archaeological kind of activity. But is there more to it than just lifting the stone? So if I lifted it to my knees, have I lifted the stone, or do I have to lift to my chest? What are those qualifications to say, hey, I have actually lifted the stone?
So yes, it's actually a great question. It's different in each country.
Okay.
Let's use Ireland, for example. There's a term called Gwaithwy, and that means the wind under in Gaelic. And basically the wind under means you just bend over and you lift the stone high enough just to get a small amount of air underneath. Envelope, an inch, 2 inches, or a foot. You can lift it to your legs. Most countries, like Scotland and Iceland, a chest lift is considered a complete lift. Whereas Ireland, the majority of the stones, since they're so much heavier, you just have to get the wind under. For me personally, I love to lift stones to my chest if I can. Sometimes you get one that's so flippin' heavy, I can't manage it. But for the most part, I personally like to get a stone to my chest. I don't think that's any more valid of a lift than a buddy of mine who would get an inch or a foot. A lot of it's personal to the stone lifter. And a lot of it is how it was lifted traditionally. That's the big thing. It's a very ancient tradition that goes back hundreds and even thousands of years in a lot of these countries. And obviously these stones were around way before a barbell or a dumbbell. And this is how people got strong and did their thing and trained for battle, stuff like that. So some of them, that's how, like in Sweden, for example, you got the Kungslena Stones. I'll be going to those in about a week's time. You had to lift the Kungslena Stone 4 times onto a plinth that was about maybe knee level height. You had to do it 4 times. And if you did so, you can marry the priest or the preacher's daughter. You were worthy.
Ooh.
So some places, that's how you find a wife. So maybe when I go
Good
over
incentive.
there.
Good incentive.
Yeah. Yep.
This is okay. Talk to me about stone characterization, because as I've looked across all the different videos that you've had, or even discovering some other folks on different pages, there's texture, there's shape. I'm learning there is the I guess that's technically textured, and there's weight. What are some, talk to me about how you characterize stones, or just the different types of stones in the world.
So, yes, we categorize them as easy, medium, and hard as fuck. If a stone is smooth as glass, let's take the Castle Menzies stone in Scotland, for example. That is the smoothest natural stone. That's the smoothest stone I've ever laid hands on. It's even smoother than an Atlas stone that doesn't have tacky on it. And Atlas stones are very smooth. But this stone, in Scotland. It's located at Castle Menzies. It was very smooth. It was only 252 pounds, maybe 253.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to shoulder it. I lifted it a lot like an Atlas stone.
Okay.
But I realized because I didn't warm up too much that my initial pick was a little slower to my lap because I needed to get my hands warmed up, and it was just so smooth and required that crushing wrist strength that not a lot of people have because you can't train that in the gym. You have to train that specifically by itself. That would be categorized as a glass smooth type of stone, similar to the Dredvig stone that I told you about in Iceland, even worse. That one's just lighter, so it's easier than the one in Iceland. However, heavier doesn't always mean more challenging.
Okay.
The heaviest stone I lifted was 619 pounds, not even close to the most challenging stone. That was Brynyyl stack. It's a pillar in Iceland. It's about 5 feet tall. So you stand it up, which is hard in of itself. You have to basically do a tire flip. And you can bear hug it. I was able to do that, and I have short arms. And just lift it off the ground. And that's just air, because that's all you can really do is lift it that much off the ground, because the stone's already as tall as you.
Mm-hmm.
That one is categorized as one that's heavy, but not necessarily ridiculously challenging. Let's use John Coffey, for example, the Kungslena Stone. I would classify that as a very technical stone next to the Cloghiem stone, aka Thomas Lonergan stone, which is the stone I did about an hour later. It had the Roman numerals on it, and I did a very similar technique to that one. Very similar shaped stone, a little smaller and a little lighter, and I thought it was a little less challenging than the John Coffey.
Mm-hmm.
But those two stones I would classify as very technical. Some are very grip dependent, and others, I say that if you have a strong grip and a decent deadlift, anyone with strong grip and a decent deadlift can break a 350-pound stone off the ground. That's why I like getting them. That's why I like going really high. But I think in order to raise a stone to your chest, that is something you have to train with stones. You can use sandbags too.
Mm-hmm.
Because that motion from your legs standing up to your chest isn't something you can really mimic with movements in the gym. There are things you can do in the gym that can be a good accessory exercise or assistance exercise, such as hip thrusts. That's when you have the barbell on your hip and you kind of do a thrust up. And as a guy, I probably get a lot of looks in the gym doing that exercise, but you know what? It's helped me build strength in ways I need to build strength. So that's really how I would classify or categorize a lot of these stones.
Yes.
Each stone has its own unique challenge to it. Even if it's a similar stone like Cloghiem and Claire Glens, there's always going to be some type of difference to them. That means you have to do something slightly different.
Mm-hmm. Does nature mean something different to you now that you lift stones? So when you're driving through, let's say, Arizona in the desert or wherever there are boulders and stuff like that, what's kind of going through your head now that you actually interact with you interact with nature in a very different way to most people, you know?
Absolutely. I find my most peace and solitude when I'm in nature. I can be by myself and I feel like I have all the friends in the world. But, I can also be at the bar with a crowd of people and feel like the loneliest person in the world. I find a lot of my peace and solitude out in nature. That's just how I am. I've always been that way. When I actually lift nature, such as stones, or it could be anything, logs too.
Yeah.
it's what makes me happy. It's what brings me peace of mind. It's my own therapy, my medication, my personal counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk to nature and it doesn't talk back, just listens.
What's the difference between lifting a heavy ass log and a heavy ass stone? What in terms of stimulus? Or I don't know. Is it different lifting two different heavy ass objects like that?
Yeah, I say if you're strong with one, you're going to have potential to be strong with the other. More so if you're super strong with stones, any log's not going to be an issue for you. Different textures, yes, but big difference between stones and logs is there's no historical logs out there, just stones. That's really how I see it. But if I see a big ass log out in nature and it looks like a challenge, looks like a possible challenge, I'll go try to lift it and record it because it'll look cool.
And before you go do some of those lifts, are you able to sort of estimate if you can lift it by just looking at it? Or you have to kind of heft it and move it around and, actually get tactile with it to figure out if you can lift it?
I can give myself a general idea on whether or not I can lift it. It's not until I actually go over there and push it around and kind of feel, like you said, that I can be like, yeah, I can do this. I have to do it this way, though, because it'll be too challenging this way or that way. But yes.
Very unique to your own body as well, right? You know how you move, etc., etc. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
What kind of shoes do you wear? And are they steel-toed?
They're not steel toe. I am guilty of not wearing it. I know a lot of people, worry about the toes, and I can honestly say I've never been close to the toes. I think the videos make it look a lot closer than it is when you drop it. With that said, also the spatial awareness that I talked about a little earlier, I think that's a big thing. I've never dropped one on my toes. I'm not saying it can't happen. I've never done it. And it's a lot further than it looks. Steel toe shoes, though, probably not a bad idea, just in case,
Yeah, well, technically, because, steel toe shoes, piece of your toe, you have this piece of steel, but if the rock is heavy enough, now I have a piece of steel that's cutting, not just a stone crushing. So it's a different form of injury to a degree. I've seen different things like that, at least in the construction community. So you talked about you're not a super tall person. You don't have super long arms. How does this height dynamic now come into it, especially maybe from a competitive standpoint? Some, very tall person just come. Are they at an advantage to some degree? Or are you at an advantage?
That would depend on the stone.
Yeah.
For example, Legstein and Brynyyl stack in Iceland, because I could get my arm around them, I had a big advantage lifting those off the ground versus a tall person. Now, the majority of stones that one would think being shorter gives an advantage actually isn't. So let's use clear glens as an example. You could see before I pivot to my left on my knees, I only lifted about 2 or 3 inches off the ground. And that's all I had to do. But because I'm a shorter guy and I have shorter arms, that stone is already pressed up against my chest, so I'm already at a full wingspan. Therefore, I actually have to bend over to about 90 degrees and do a full bend over.
Wow.
In order to get that stone off the ground, whereas some of my friends who were taller that would get the wind under, they could wrap their entire arms around easily. And they're not even at 90 degrees. They're more up in a squat position, and they can kind of just go straight up with it. Whereas I had to bend over a lot more. And because I have shorter limbs, the stone being as big as it is was also challenging it, finagling it through my legs.
Right.
I've had trouble getting stones to my lap that were just super wide. And it was annoying because I was strong enough to do it, but I really struggled to get them to my knees just because I was short, and I lifted a couple inches and it's just stuck against the inside of my thighs. And I have to figure out what to do from there. So yes, it would have a lot to do with the stone. I think a lot of stones you're at a disadvantage being a smaller guy, but some stones I'm at an advantage for sure.
I think before I would say I was living under a rock. Now I have to say I was living under a stone to be more accurate. And I didn't actually realize to me, it seems a pretty vibrant stone lifting community. And you have a ton of friends that you do things with. And then I discovered there's a stone lifting podcast or a stone strength podcast. And that just blew my mind. And for me, what gets me quite interesting is that we're showed this view of the world of maybe what success is, what is happiness, how, and then seeing you guys operate and just find this could be solitary, it could be with your friends, challenging activity and just seeing the joy that it brings. Can you tell us about the stone lifting community and what it's like?
Very, I think, niche, as they call it. It's not, well, it's getting a little more known now that the one video shot up. I think more people, it's bringing more attention to people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are seeing, wow, this is a thing. Never heard of it, but shit, I'm in. Before that, though, no, it's not pop. It wasn't popular. Nobody knew about it. Someone sees you lifting a rock out at the park, and they call the cops because they're like, "What is this nutcase doing?" That's why here in America, when I'm lifting stones and training, I do it away from people because they won't get it. And with people watching me, a lot of the times I don't want to say nervous. I lose focus.
Yes. Okay.
And focus is a huge thing. And people have to understand what's going on. So until that becomes more of a thing out here, I just keep to myself. But go to Scotland or Ireland or Iceland, I'll lift the stone in the middle of a street in rush hour traffic. Somebody's going to know what's going on.
Yes. Okay. So big cultural aspect to engaging with the sport. I see.
Absolutely.
And it must be quite fun. Personally, in initial thought, it's like, okay, I'm going on vacation. Like you doing these stone tours. Okay, I'm going to travel across the world and I'm going to lift objects. Like I just came back from a kettlebell seminar this weekend, and I guess that is also strange as well. I flew to go take a piece of metal and swing it around in many different ways. So I guess to some degree it's fairly similar, but it seems to make you happy so far.
Absolutely.
Aside from lifting stones making you happy, why do you lift stones? What are some other reasons?
I would say mentally it makes me happy, but physically it makes me strong, resilient. And I feel like it also strengthens me spiritually. I think that goes back to the being one with nature. These trips to me are trips and journeys into the mental, physical, and spiritual. That's why they're so important to me. That's why I have a passion for doing it. That's the best way I could put it. Sometimes even I can't articulate what it is about it. I just feel like I was bred for it. I feel like I was born for it. And it's definitely my purpose, or one of them. I would like to do it for as long as I can.
So if you're going to hit 90, fuck that. You're going to hit 90. You're going to hit 95. I'll get 95. You're going to be trying to lift stones at 95?
Lift myself out of my wheelchair, then yeah, I'm going to try to lift some stones. It could be a brick. As long as it's a stone, I'll be trying to lift it. But yeah, I would like to stay strong and resilient for as long as I can. And I truly believe that's possible as long as you're smart with recovery, nutrition, and properly doing exercises. I'm not going to go lift the clear glenstone when I'm 90 years old.
Fair enough.
However, I think I'll still possess that strength at 50 and 55. So many people think that we fall apart once we hit 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually believed that for a while until I just said, no, that's not the case. I'm not going to let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And and 30 is not old at all, which is the problem with a lot of people's mentality. Is they're like, oh, wait till you hit 30. I mean, I move as good, if not better, than I did when I was in my early to mid 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I plan to move better at 35 than I do at 30. Plan to move better at 40 than I do 35.
50.
That's my mentality. That's my goal. It's going to require a mindset, and it's going to require being smart and knowing what you're doing, not overdoing it, knowing your own personal limits, because we all have them.
So you said there's a spiritual side. So I'm all into this kind of energy thing. And when I go in nature, I think sort of the original inhabitants of America, when you go visit, like I went to Red Rock Canyons out in Las Vegas and just walking through the canyons, I imagine that there was absolutely no infrastructure. And this was pure nature and I think the west of America has a certain energy versus the east, right? And versus the cliffs in California. Just the nature really moves you in, as you're saying, undescribable ways. At least that's what I've felt. Do you think rocks have energy in them? That just, I don't know, when I go hug a big boulder, it just, I like to touch big rocks. So this is why I was even more interested. So I probably want to be in a community. I just didn't know there was a community of people that like big rocks. But do you think rocks have energy in your head?
I would say that some of the rocks do. I think it's and it doesn't necessarily have to be the historic lifting stones, although I believe they do. Mm-hmm. I think it could be other rocks that have other history to them, such as Shiprock in New Mexico. Oh, it's a big, giant, I'll send you a picture later. Mm-hmm. It's a giant hidden gem, I may say, that not a lot of people know about, but they should. However, maybe it's good not a lot of people do, because it would turn into a litter spot, I feel like. But nobody goes out there. I've gone there 3 times. There's never been a single person out there. There is so much energy to this thing, and it's ginormous. It's over 1,500 feet high. It was formed, I want to say, I know it's millions of years ago. I don't know how many millions of years ago, but millions and millions of years ago. There's a lot of history to it. Why I'm saying this is because I think the stones or the rocks that have personal history and stories to them are the ones that carry the energy. Because there was once an actual physical importance and existence surrounding those stones, or lifting rocks in my case, and that residual energy is left over. A lot of people probably think I'm crazy. I feel like I am physically enhanced when I go over to these countries and lift these rocks. I feel like the energy from these stones, or from maybe my Irish ancestors, Scottish ancestors, or from the spirits of those that once lifted the stones, reside within me. Not make me superhuman necessarily, obviously, but more so allow me to perform at my highest potential that I could on any given day, for as much as I need to and for as many days as I need to. Almost my own personal pre-workout that doesn't stop working until I need it to stop.
Huh.
Yeah, that's kind of my outlook on it. A little out there, but yeah.
How did you get started in stone lifting?
About, 2018.
Oh, so it's recent. Not very long ago.
Kind of. There were two documentaries that came out. I've never heard of historic stone lifting until then. One was called Fullsterker. That's this one in regards to the Icelandic stones. I will actually send you both of the the documentaries from YouTube later. They're short, they're free to watch. They both came out on Netflix in 2018. So Fullsterker for Iceland and Stoneland for Scotland. Now, neither of these documentaries cover anywhere near the amount of stones in either of these countries. However, to be fair, even they didn't know about them back then. They were lost until my friend, his name is Sean Urquhart, and a few others. There's Ryan Stewart and there is Nick Whalen searching in Iceland and found a lot of them that were lost and not in the documentary. I watched these documentaries and I thought, this is sick. I would love to go to these countries one day and get my hands on these. However, at the time, I didn't see that as a likely possibility. It was just a pipe dream to me. Fast forward to 2020 during COVID. I was living back home in my home state of New York. I'm born and raised in Buffalo. And I was hiking with a friend and we stumbled under a bridge with hundreds of stones. And I tell this story on every podcast. Hundreds of stones. And I thought of the documentaries. And I said, hey, take my video and record me. I went and lifted one of the stones, and that was it from there. Now, still then, I never had the mindset that I'm going to go to these countries and do this one day. I didn't see it as a likely thing just because I didn't know if I'd ever find the financial opportunities or the time in general. But I knew I loved lifting stones, and I knew I loved lifting awkward things. And I would go there 2-3 times a week and lift stones. Loved it. It wasn't until about a year and a half ago where I made the pipe dream a reality, and I knew I had the funds. I was a single guy, no kids. I only had to worry about myself. There's no reason I can't go do this. So in October of 2022, I just decided to book my vacations to Iceland, and I waited all those months. Actually never trained with stones for that trip. I just trained with weights, which is probably not the best idea, but that's another thing. I don't really train for stones. I'll get into that at another moment. But I scheduled this trip to Iceland, and let's fast forward from October to June. Go to Iceland, kick ass, and I was happy. And really, I was content. Or so I thought I was. I didn't think that I needed any or had any desire to go to the other countries, such as Ireland. Ireland wasn't even a thought because these were new and I didn't take them serious. Little did I know. But I never had any desire to go to Scotland after Iceland, Faroe Islands, Sweden. Forget it. And then all of a sudden, I did. Just came out of nowhere, and I wanted to lift all the stones that I can lift that are historical. I want to lift the most before I die. I want to go to all these countries. So I booked, we'll fast forward to September of 2023, so not too long ago. I booked my trip to Ireland for June. And that's all I had planned on doing. However, December came along, and I thought, no reason I can't go to Sweden. Or hell, I have to go back to Iceland because there's 5 stones I didn't lift last year because I ran out of time. I'm going to stop in Iceland for 2 days in July and then fly to Sweden for 6, which is, I'm leaving in 2 days. But we can also go to my Scotland trip, which I took in March, end of March. I never had a plan on doing that. However, when February came around and I was, 3 months from Ireland, I was just so pumped. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to lift a historical stone. So I got on the computer and booked my trip to Scotland. Went to Scotland, kicked ass there, made lots of friends. And then here we are, talking about these great times that I'll never forget. And hopefully many, many more times even after this. that I will never forget.
I think this is an important story because everyone in the world has to earn a living to survive, right? But everyone in the world has some desire that they want to just do something cool with their life, just do something that makes them feel alive. And not many people actually make that jump to go do something that truly makes them feel alive. Now that you've done it, how does it feel? And what piece of advice you have for folks thinking they're on that edge, thinking and they kind of know where they want to go? What's your thoughts there?
Personally, I feel like I have achieved my own personal level of success. Now, success is an ever-going thing, so that has to continue. It doesn't end there. However, I think you mentioned success and how people look at it earlier, and I think my version of success is you're doing what makes you happy, even if it's not necessarily bringing you a living. Like you said, we all gotta earn money, make a living, and I have a normal job too. Thankfully, I get the summers off. But my biggest advice to others, and this might sound easy coming from a guy who's, again, only responsible for himself right now, no family, just have to worry about me. So it's a little easier for me to say, go out and do it, because I have the time, the energy, the money to do so. Now, I recommend to those who do have all those qualities available to just make the jump with it, whatever it is. You won't regret it. I certainly didn't. It's not easy, it never is. But it's just, we got to do what makes us happy in this life. It's twirling my fingers and talking to the ceiling, then that's what makes you happy. That's what makes you happy. Lifting stones, doing art, playing soccer, anything, regardless of the risks involved. Obviously I can get hurt lifting stones. I know that. Doesn't take a genius to know that. I feel like people think that I'm not aware that I can hurt myself, and they feel the need to tell me that I can hurt myself or I'm going to hurt myself. That can happen with anything. You can cough too hard. You can sneeze too hard and throw out your back. Doing what you love doing is going to make you happy. Therefore, you're happy, you're mentally more healthy. If you're more healthy in every way, probably going to lead to a longer life. It's more than just physical. But some activities are physical. Yes. Mine happens to be physical, but just whatever your passion is, do it if you can. If you really have the ability and resources to do it.
That's pretty cool. So here's a very interesting question. I think we're in the modern age, we're in a testosterone decline epidemic. And what I mean by that is that let's not go into the whole toxic masculinity, all that shit. More coming from the vitality of a man as he grows in age, right? And I think just the practicing, our ancestors would have been in nature, in that environment, testing their bodies, using their bodies as, I believe we're very just high functioning animals. I think I always come back. I always remind myself, no matter how sophisticated I am, I go to the bathroom. I go pee and poop like every other animal in the animal kingdom. So no matter what president or whoever big star, they go in the toilet and they're doing the same thing like you, So let's just keep it real. And going along with that, it just, what should I say, boy? Just the simplicity of coming back to what is true. And people use physical training as a way to, especially strength training with your legs, to, let's say, boost testosterone or, stay sort of rigorous. How is training different in the gym? Let's say you're doing squats, deadlift. I've looked at some of your workouts versus going to lift a stone. What do you think is the actual sort of effect on your I don't want to say testosterone, but just on that vitality that you get from an activity. You see what I'm saying? Is there a difference?
Yeah. There's definitely a difference.
Hmm.
In a gym, when you're doing the exercises, granted, some of those exercises can be manipulated in ways that create some very awkward, unconventional movement patterns. But I'll stick to the basics just to answer your question more so. There's a huge difference. Lifting stones, your body works in a synergy, I believe it's called. All the links of your body have to go together in one, but each link of that is constantly changing throughout each little step of the movement. From the stabilizers in your ankles, the way you wiggle your toes, literally, all the way up to clenching your jaw or squeezing your chest in or squeezing your forearms or moving your elbow this way or that way. You don't get that necessarily when you're doing a normal exercise that requires a straight barbell path that's the same all the time. Not to say those aren't great exercises. They are. They're your bread and butter. But at the end of the day, lifting a stone is way different than lifting a barbell, no matter how you do it. It's going to train your body in different ways. Your ligaments, your tendons, your bone density, all of it. I think for lifting awkward things such as stones, tendon strength is big at play, I would say. Now, I also love training in the gym because I need to work on things that are going to help carry over to stone lifting and help keep certain parts of my body healthy and strong so that I can continue to do work with stones. Basically, kind of like you would do, let's say, tricep pushdowns as an assistance or accessory exercise to increase your bench press.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do good mornings or lunges or Bulgarian split squats, standing ab wheel, bicep curls with fat grips, all of that, Turkish get-ups. So many things I can think of as assistance exercises to prepare my body for what I'll have to do with stones. And for me, it has worked wonders. I don't have the exercises. I think there are numerous ways to get better at stone lifting or stronger in general. There's no one way. Every person has to find their own, and everything I stated is just my own.
Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely recommend it to others. However, if they had questions about other things, such as bench press, squatting, deadlifting, I would help them out in that area too. I personally don't do it. However, I do believe they are great. People should do them. They're your bread and butter. They're the basics for a reason.
Yes. You know, another reason I do this show is that the space of careers is changing. So I'm in AI. I formally, my day job is a data scientist, right? And so I get to see sort of where things are going. And what started to get me very interested is that I was on TikTok, and the TikTok algorithm is absolutely beautiful. If you understand the true mechanics behind it, it's just amazing. And what really got me interested was just seeing the views to the content. What were people actually super interested in? And I started watching this lady doing calligraphy. So people are paying this lady to write their names on a piece of paper. And I was like, what? What is happening? Then I'll see some big, strapped black dude, man looking, the man look, like Adonis. And he giving some sexy voice and women paying him. And there are these alternate economies that just came out of the woodwork for me. So where I'm going with this is, I think we live in a time where the path to passion, to some degree, has a much more higher probability of that financial component actually being successful. Like, it just popped in my head, oh, you could actually be an online stone strength coach. You know what I mean? Just, that's a completely viable business. And there's another gentleman who lives actually locally here in Melbourne, Florida, random ass tiny place. He started the first mobile jiu-jitsu sort of practice, right? Because sometimes I've never done jiu-jitsu. I've wanted to do it, but I'm personally like I have an ankle injury. So I'm consciously aware of for whatever reason, take fairly long to heal from injuries. So I'm like, okay, do I want to go into a gym and come in with not necessarily a bunch of newbies, but there is that element of they may not be proficient at the sport because it is inherently when you're pulling arm bars and all that kind of stuff. So he is now kind of charting that path with his passion. So I sort of give that to you, or I'm sure you probably thought about it already as a sort of mechanism to make this thing a true reality,
Absolutely.
When you actually do one of these lifts, what percentage of your max strength? I know it's naturally different for different stones, but I'm trying to get a sense of the tension that's in your body when you're lifting these heavy things. Because I think lifting heavy things has the mental, the physical, in some cases, the spiritual, I think, depending on how different folks are aligned. And we'll talk about aggression just now, but what does the tension feel like in your body when you go to lift a heavy stone versus maybe a heavy deadlift?
It's actually a very interesting question. And I'll probably explain it in an interesting, weird way. I personally don't feel the amount of tension in my body that I'm using while lifting a 200-pound stone versus a 400-pound one. And I think that's a lot like the old term, don't know your own strength type of thing. I personally don't feel it. However, when I have felt it is when I'll grab onto a stone maybe, and perhaps my grip just slips. And it's like, it just surprisingly slips. And when it slips, I either slap my own wrist or my own palm with my fingers or slap my face or something because the force pulling that way. And that's when I know just how much force I'm putting on that stone when I am lifting it. Or when I was rock climbing, for example, when I grab onto these little holds, I don't feel the amount of pressure that I'm putting into it. But God forbid I slip, I feel that force tenfold. And it's very interesting. I think that's a lot in the mind. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's most certainly, maybe it's not different. I would say the tension would be similar if you're lifting a bar because it's tension of your own body. It's squeezing, making muscles work as one. And let's say you had the same outcome and it slipped out of your hands with, say, a regular barbell deadlift. You might feel the same thing with the force of your hands hitting each other. But yeah, that's the best I can put it, if that makes sense.
Okay. No, that's also interesting because I would have thought I don't lift super heavy just because I've had some injuries when I try to lift heavy, and like I was saying, it doesn't feel as good on my joints. So I personally don't think I've just put in the time in the system under heavy load for both my joints and joint movement capabilities to adapt to that weight. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
But the mental aspect is super interesting to me. So what is the mental aspect of lifting heavy shit? Or heavy stones in this case?
I would say a lot of it mentally, you have to believe that you can do it. Most people are going to look at a boulder and be like, nobody in the world can lift that. Whereas someone with my mentality is, I could look at a boulder that's ginormous and I could say to myself, there's a way to lift that. I bet you I can do it. And someone else might think I'm a psychopath, and they'd be right. And that's how I think that the mindset and the mentality plays its role in this.
So every time you go to lift a stone, you are actively telling it, like, I'm going to lift this. It's a very conscious thing that you tell yourself versus like, okay, like, you're going to lift the stone, so you're just focusing on lifting. But are you actively telling yourself, I can lift this shit what's your mental self-talk? Put the speaker on the mic in John's head and walk me through what you're thinking. Is it super zen, or is it? Some people get really angry, and I'm very actually curious about the proxy of anger to strength. How people use anger to drive strength. It didn't seem like you were very angry in your lift. So what's your thoughts there?
I would say before and during my lift, I am very zen. I'm in a calm state, focused state, more importantly. And it's not until the end of that battle with a super challenging stone that the beast comes out. It's not that case with all stones. Mostly the stones that I know aren't going to be that big of a deal for me, but the ones that I know I'm going to lift it in a way that no one's ever lifted it before, that's when the beast comes out at the end. Because I know I just did something extraordinary. And I say that with humility. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. But for me, it's the beast comes out when I know that I've made an accomplishment with something. And for me, lifting a 250-pound stone, the accomplishment for that would be if it's a historic stone, I check another one off my list. But the accomplishment for lifting a 400 or 500-pound historical stone is that much more personal to me than a lighter one.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you said two things: battle. So I'm gonna really play into the verbiage here, because one of the other reasons I sort of started the show is one, showing many different definitions of quote unquote success. Two, understanding what are the subtle nuances that people have in their mind that enable them to sort of achieve great things. So you said battle. Are you actively thinking about lifting a stone as a battle that you're going to embark on versus just I'm lifting a stone?
Absolutely, yes.
Ooh.
I would use the Ballingarry cross stone as an example of this. This was one in Ireland. Clare Glens was absolutely a battle, although it wasn't egregiously difficult for me, but it was still a battle. A stone that was a real true battle, I would say, I think I just said Ballingarry cross, but let me use a different idea of a stone. Altac Domhillmore. That is a Altac stone in the island of Uist, which is Scotland. It's off the coast of Scotland, but it's still Scotland. Not many people, I think only 2 people have got it to their chest, myself and a guy named Jamie Gorian. That stone, from the moment it left the ground to the moment I lifted it to my chest, I believe was exactly 30 seconds. And I'll send you the video later. It's very rare that I let out a scream when I'm lifting something or show like signs of a strain. But for some reason, that stone made me really have to battle. And here's the thing. It only weighed 369 pounds. That's not that heavy for me when it comes to stones. But I think it had a lot to do with the shape and texture of that one and the weight distribution, because that's everything. One of the most challenging stones I've ever lifted to my chest, but also not that heavy whatsoever. And that one was a battle for me. It took every ounce of might. I wrestled it. I lifted it to my lap, twirled it around a few times, and one grip didn't work because it was wet and muddy. And I said to you'll hear me in the video go, son of a bitch. So I have to turn the stone more this way, and then I get a good grip. But by the time I do that, I'm starting to get tired. My forearms are starting to get fatigued. So now I have less force to pull the stone in, and I'm still doing it, but it's a lot more of a battle. And that's by the time I got it to my stomach and I was able to hoist it to my chest. It took everything I had in me, because I was this close to just pure, total lactic acid buildup in my forearms, and I couldn't hold on to it anymore.
So this is exciting. That means every time you book a trip, because our ancestors would technically just go to war, They just knew a war was coming and everybody's prepping for battle. So in essence, you book these trips and you're like, shit, I'm getting ready to go to war. And so there's all of that ampness that's coming. Oh, that's kind of cool. So you're simulating essentially war you're simulating Zen war. In fact, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's my own personal Zen war. I would say my own personal battle and goal and mission.
So you interact a lot with different people in the community who lift stones. Would you say most people lift with aggression? So I have a lot of friends who lift fairly heavy stuff, and I could see them maybe tap into aggression when they go to do very heavy lifts. I've tried to tap into aggression. I'm just not a very aggressive person, I guess. So maybe that's why I don't lift heavy shit. How many other of your sort of folks that you interact with you see lift with aggression versus everybody's focus, no doubt. But what's your sort of take on that?
I would say it's half and half. I think some of the guys I know do it with aggression. Others are focused, do it with a calm and zen. I also think that a lot of us can be vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
We can go both ways.
Okay.
Sometimes I might need to get aggressive in order to bring my headspace back. My usual go-to is calm, cool, collective. But if that's not working, well, time to bring out the big guns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And vice versa for the guys that are... Sometimes they need to tone it down a bit because that aggression is making them lose focus and perhaps miss a step during a lift.
Are you visualizing a lift before you do it, typically?
Oh, yeah. Not only am I visualizing it seconds before I attempt the lift, but months before my trips.
I see. Okay.
That's Ballingarry Cross in Ireland was one of them. I had this vision in my head. But I'm not sure if you've heard of the Husafell Stone in Iceland.
No, I have not.
Okay. Basically, it's a Husafell Stone on steroids. The Husafell Stone is 409 pounds, and Ballingarry Cross Stone in Ireland is literally to a T, the exact same shape, texture, everything. The only difference is it's about 8 to 10 inches taller, and it's literally 3 times as thick. Not an exaggeration. Until I went up to this thing, it is like this thick. And I can't even get my hands in the screen to show how tall it is, but it was very tall. It's got to be in the ballpark of 600 pounds. Wow. And I told myself for months, I'm going to lift that stone. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know I'm going to do it. Any way I could do it, it's coming off the ground. And I knew it would be the hardest stone to get air under on that trip. And I had to do it unconventionally. I had to basically decrease my range of motion by getting on my knees and grabbing it that way and lifting it.
I know which stone you're talking about. I watched that video and I was like, what the fuck is he doing trying to lift? Because I'm thinking stone has to come all the way up. I'm like, what the fuck are you on your knees? That's one way you're on your knees? And
that was that one.
I was freaking out. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
That one, at least in the moment, I knew there was no other way. It was the hardest stone on the trip, and it was my 23rd stone of that trip. So you can imagine, I'm 6 days into this trip lifting heavy-ass stones. This is my 23rd stone, probably the hardest stone there, and I have to find a way to lift it while I am fatigued. And luckily, I feel like I've conditioned myself over the years so I can handle fatigue a lot better than most. But I was fatigued. However, I still managed it. I did it. Maybe not the way I wanted, but I did it. And no one can ever take it away from me. And it was a stone I thought about before going to bed at night and thought about when I woke up in the morning.
Wow. So this is you're definitely on the path of obsession, which I think is a super healthy thing because you're alive, you're living, you're consumed, which is always a beautiful thing to see. What would you say drives you?
I think I would say the history that's involved in all of it is what drives me. Do I love testing my strength? Yes. However, if it was all about testing my strength, I'm not going to go spend thousands of dollars to travel across the world. It's more than that. It's the history involved. It's the stories about these stones. And it's me wanting to not only place myself in that history, but also make history of my own. I want to do things that nobody has ever done before. Not that no one can do it, but I want to do it first. And it's my passion. It's what I love doing. It's absolutely an obsession, like you said. There's no other word to put it. It's an obsession. And it feeds my soul is how I can explain it.
And I feel like I could see that in your videos. When I watch you lift, there's just joy. I'm like, I want that feeling. I just want to feel how he's feeling right now. And I don't think the average person watched the video that went viral. I don't think they watched that video and they were like, wow, he just lifted this huge rock. I personally think they saw just straight joy and like, wow, life is simple to sort of find that happiness. And I wanted to shift into injury because naturally everyone will tell you you're going to get hurt. What's your mental approach to injury? Because I'm sure you might have tweaked things along the years. How do you mentally rationalize injury, and what's your approach? If you get kind of injured lifting, on how do you keep yourself on track?
It's a topic I love discussing, and I think it's important for anyone getting involved in whether it's stone lifting or anything physical to hear it out and listen. Injury prevention and mentally preparing yourself for the possibility of injury is huge. Knock on wood, I have never been injured. Mm-hmm. I would like to keep it that way, and my mentality is I plan on keeping it that way. However, I'm not invincible. I'm not unbreakable. I'm not indestructible. It can happen to anyone. Really, it's telling myself, look, sure, you can drop that stone. I did drop a stone when I was in Ireland. I don't know if you saw that video. If you didn't, I'll show it to you later. It fell right on top of me. And I know that can happen. But for me personally, I am so messed up in the head that it doesn't faze me or scare me. For someone who maybe doesn't have my mentality, I would say, don't be afraid to do what makes you happy because of what can happen. Because you could be sitting there watching The Office on TV and have a heart attack. And it's just, when your time's up, your time's up. Injury prevention is big. A lot of my workout routine is revolved around bodybuilding, really. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think I'm crazy they're like, wait a minute, you do bodybuilding, but you're lifting stones. No, that's the wrong approach. And I can see where they're coming from. I love bodybuilding because I love doing high rep weight training. I love sets of 10. I love sets of 15, 20. I'll even go as high as doing a full set of 50 every now and then. I think it can build strength. I think it's done a lot for me. But also, I believe that it builds the work capacity because of all the volume I'm doing, builds the work capacity for me to be able to lift many, many stones throughout a trip. In Iceland, I lifted 30. In Scotland, I did 36. In Ireland, I did 28. On this next trip I got coming up next week, although there might not be as many stones as challenging as the ones in Ireland, there's going to be a lot more. I have potentially, on my map, I think I have probably, if you combine the Iceland and Sweden, 100 plus stones. I don't know if I'll make it to all of them because of time, But if I do, well, you can bet my body's going to pay for it. However, that training approach that I've taken throughout the years, I believe, has prepared me for what I'm going to do. And it's going to keep my body as safe as possible. And I think just the knowledge of me knowing my body and knowing the stone and knowing what I'm doing is going to help. But injury prevention is key. So for me, high rep training, I do lower reps. Good mornings, you'll see me do sets of 1 to 5. However, for the most part, I love sets of 10 plus. Getting the blood into the muscle, getting the blood into the tendons, because blood flow is a lot less to the tendons than it is the muscle. Working mobility, foam rolling, working out your hips in ways, using a lacrosse ball and digging into areas that are tight, hanging upside down on an inversion table or with your gravity boots, taking ice cold baths or showers. All of that, I think, plays a huge role in injury prevention, work capacity, and one's ability to keep on going, because stone tours are going to beat you up. I can tell you that. I hurt during them and I hurt after them. That approach that I take beforehand is what allows me to only feel a small amount of displeasure and not experience any severe injuries in the process. It can still happen, but I lessen the chances by a lot.
Yeah. What can people do in the gym to get more unevenness? So that's why I just took a functional kettlebell training course. So you go in very non-linear planes and you try to get as much different directions as possible. What are some things that you do in a traditional gym to mimic the unevenness of a stone, especially on the erectors, spinning on your back? I imagine that those are two main muscles that have to have strength in direction as well. And also, if you can just touch upon some things you do for tendon strengthening, because one quick thing there, I don't know if you know, I don't know if it's a Polish strongman. I think he was, this is way back in the day, and he was a prisoner, and then he got out and he was in a circus, and he was the one who I think brought about isometrics. So a lot of his strength training came from just, he was trapped in prison and he was chained for I don't know how many months or years, and he just used a ton of isometric exercises, and he was famous for, when he went to war, he carried his horse out of war. Do you know about this person?
I don't know the name. I've heard the story.
Okay.
I think, didn't he bend the steel bars to get out too?
Yes. Yeah. So he was that person that a big philosophy in his training was it kind of makes sense, but it was all about tendons and isometrics versus reps. He was just really big into that. So does that translate to your training as well? Do you feel the same?
Definitely. So there's a few things I could touch up on that. So in regards to the erector muscles on the back, which you mentioned, I love to do the super deep good mornings for those. You don't have to go as deep as me. If someone wants to do the good mornings, you can go 90 degrees. I would suggest at least going to 90. I have a specialty bar that allows me to go. It's called a spider bar. It's right here in my apartment.
That's the one they have like this, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's great because it allows me to go super deep. And then I also have the safety squat bar, which I could do the seated good mornings with. And I could also do the upper back thoracic spine good mornings. So I have it on my back and I just do this. And it looks like it's a very short range of motion, but it can be very challenging. And it actually works your diaphragm muscles too. The deep core, I feel it in too. That's something you can do. Again, you could use it with a barbell. A exercise you could do in the gym to mimic those awkward planes of motion, the Turkish get-up. My number one favorite exercise in the world. I've been doing that for 12 years.
Wow.
That, the windmill, the one-arm snatch. I think unilateral training is important too. Lunges, Bulgarian split squats, anything that's going to put your body off balance and make you have to use those stabilizer muscles that you don't typically use with, say, a regular, what's the other, not unilateral, but the
Bilateral?
single motion. Bilateral, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That you wouldn't use the same stabilizers that you use for a bilateral motion. I would say exercises like that train the tendons. Exercise in general is going to increase bone density, train the tendons. Some things more than others. Rock climbing will increase the bone density in your fingers. Bending steel, which is another thing. I used to do it. I don't do it anymore. That builds like really solid bones and tendons and ligaments. Much different than stone lifting would. Much different than lifting weights. I would say grip training is big. Try not to use straps if you can. Really train the shit out of your grip. Use fat bars. You can use fat grips and wrap them around a bar, a dumbbell, and it increases the diameter of the dumbbell or barbell. So it's like grabbing onto something like this. Woo! You'll get a pump. Doing the wrist rollers. I think a lot of the important tendons and ligaments that need to translate over the stone lifting are all in here. Everything in there.
Super interesting. Wow.
Yep.
And when you're actively lifting, are you consciously, so if you look at bodybuilders, they don't need a ton of weight to inject a stimulus, the pro bodybuilders or folks who are very, very good. Are you at that same level where I can take a fat grip with, 25 pounds, but you can really, get into these? Are you at that level?
Absolutely. When you use a fat grip, 25 pounds is all you need. Do a set of 20, 25 reps per arm. Oh my God. It hurts, but so good. The pump you feel in your forearms is like nothing you've ever felt before. Maybe rock climbing will give you a similar pump, but it's a juicy pump, let me tell you.
So how do you train your thighs to have a 300-pound rock or 400-pound, 500-pound rock sit on them? Like what is that? Is that just squats? Because that's a heavy ass rock sitting on your actual thighs itself. I'm sure your clothing sort of makes it slightly more comfortable, but talk to us about just that physical capacity to hold that amount of weight, especially in more technical lifts versus just, clearing air. Now that I've learned something about lifting stones.
I would say that having strong knee stabilizers, strong ankle stabilizers is important for something like that because, you'll have it on there and your body's going to want to shake. Lunges, Bulgarian split squats. Now, that's me being biased because that's what I like to do.
Fair enough.
However, it works. Squats will help. However, I think something that's going to help carry over to that unbalance that you're going to get with a stone, lunges and Bulgarian split squats, because those are very unilateral. You have to stabilize and build those unilateral muscles and unilateral strength that you might not build bilaterally. And that will help tremendously with balancing that stone on the knees and maneuvering it while you're on the knees.
Well, what's your recommendation for folks to get started in stone lifting? Like what's a good 3-month sort of progression? I'm almost 100% sure it's not go lift a stone immediately, unless it's just to feel, all right, I'm out in nature and just be in nature to lift a stone. But what's on maybe mini progression for someone to think about it? I'm going to steal it and try to do it at some point.
I would say you can start off with stones. Start off with lighter ones. You can find them in a lot of places, out in nature, out by a river, out at a park. Start small, just like you would in a gym. You're not going to jump right into a 500-pound deadlift. You want to start small, learn the technique that works best and resonates with you.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to have a slightly different approach to it. Sandbags are huge. If for some reason you can't find a stone, sandbags.
Okay.
Huge carryover.
Yeah, I saw you doing one of your videos where you had the slam balls and you were just right here, just holding a slam ball up and down, just getting reps in. So it was just beautiful to see the specificity of each of your exercises that you were doing, and you could clearly see how that would transfer over, because I've seen you do some of the single lifts on top of each shoulder. Is there a name for when you put a stone on your shoulder? Is there a specific thing? No, I just get it up.
Shoulder, they call it. Yeah, shouldering a stone. It's no
shouldering
one
a
really.
stone.
Yeah, there's only one story I know of, I think, where where a set of historic stones were put to the shoulder. Most places require just a lift to the chest, but the Kiltennel graveyard stones in Ireland were shoulder heaving stones, and there's 3 of them: small, medium, large. I think the largest is like 280 something, and you would shoulder all these stones. And I believe when they say heave it, you'd shoulder it and then throw it over your shoulder. I might be wrong here, but it was something like that. And I don't know if that was done after funerals to celebrate. Might have been.
The name of the podcast is called Progress Guaranteed. So what are some things that you do every day to make progress?
When I'm not training, I'm resting. I am laying down on the foam roller. I'm hanging upside down from my pull-up bar with my gravity boots. You could see me in the cold shower, making the water as cold as possible. I would tell you nutrition's important. However, I eat like complete dog shit. Except for right now, I'm really carb loading for my upcoming trip. I'll eat 2 big servings of rice I get over at the sushi place. I'll do that for 5 days. And I got 2 more days of doing it. Stuff like that. Other than that, sleep. Sleep is huge.
Yeah. Talk to me about this.
It's not unlikely to see me go to bed at 8 o'clock at night sometimes. I love my sleep. Even on my days off. Here in the summer, I have the whole summer off. Sometimes I'll go to bed at 8 o'clock. Especially right now that I'm prehabbing myself for this trip. I'll take a sleeping pill at 7 o'clock tonight, maybe 8 o'clock, and I'll make sure to be able to sleep until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Get as much sleep as I can. I try to take advantage of every possibility that is going to help me on my trip. I stay out of the pubs. I don't really go to those anymore anyways, but stay away from alcohol because I love drinking. But yeah, there's a lot. I have a method for when I'm preparing for these trips, and that's fun too. It's boring because I want to just get there and get on with it.
Done.
But yeah.
What's your self-talk like when you're not making progress? Are you angry, self-deprecating? I think every person has their own way how they motivate themselves. What's yours?
For the most part, I try to always keep a positive head. I tell myself, you're not going to get stronger every session. You're going to have bad sessions. But those bad sessions are actually the ones you want to make the best sessions, because those putting in that work when you're feeling like shit is some of the most important training you can do. One, it's going to build character. It's going to build grit. It's going to allow you to work past your own limits when you're feeling down. Because if you waste that session and be like, today's shit, I'm just going to throw in the towel early. You're skipping out on a session that you could be getting in work. You still need to be putting in that work regardless. When you get to a higher level, getting stronger takes longer. That's just the way it is for everyone. If you're a gifted athlete and if you're not, everyone has their limits. And everyone's going to hit that plateau. But like Bruce Lee said, well, he said there's no limits. There are plateaus. There's only plateaus. And I have to say there are limits, but our limits are higher than we see them to be. But we will get stuck in plateaus, and we have to work through those plateaus to push those limits. Because if we didn't have limits, I could go outside and pick a semi truck over my head and throw it like the Hulk. That's not likely. Yes. However, our limits aren't as low as most of us see. We could be a lot stronger than we would think. And I think stone lifting has brought a lot of that out in me, at least. We're all going to get in the wrong headspace sometimes. We're all going to feel down. You just got to keep pushing through it. Get it done. Tell yourself that you can.
So when you want to quit during a lift or during a stone lift, I'm sure at different points, either from fatigue or whatever's coming to you at that point, some other voice comes in. What are you saying at that point? That's a very, very targeted question, actually.
That's a good question. And I actually have a story about that in Ireland, because the video of me that went viral could have very possibly not happened. So the John Coffey, a.k.a. Kungslena Stone, was on June 9th. I arrived in Ireland on June 5th. I started lifting hours after I got off the plane. 0 sleep on the plane. I'm on 24 hours of no sleep. And one of my first stones of the day is the 2 flags of Denn. One is the original flag of Den, 553 pounds. The other one's a mere 384. So anyways, I'm already a zombie and I'm going in and I have to lift these stones, right? And I got what I needed done that day. But let me tell you, that jet lag and going straight into it with stones that are much harder than any other country I've been to, I was already feeling a little beat up. Go to day 2. I got a little bit of sleep. I think I slept for 5 hours. And I felt a little better that day. I was still having some trouble. My stomach was bothering me. That happens when I travel. It's normal for a lot of people. But by day 3 and day 4, I was struggling, let me tell you. Not only was I in physical pain, because these stones were much more than I've ever done before, and there were so many of them, but I was starting to feel mentally defeated. I was starting to feel spiritually defeated. I was ready to give up and quit. I thought my trip was over. I mean, when I tell you I would wake up in the morning and get out of bed and feel like an old man, granted, you hurt more in the morning always, but because of what I've been putting my body through, I was hurting a lot more. So this is day 5 when I wake up, and I was telling my friend Andy, I'm like, look, man, I'm supposed to have three more days of lifting. Today, tomorrow, and the day after. Actually, 4. No, sorry, 3, but still a lot. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I think I'm going to take the day off today and rest, maybe tomorrow as well. And then I'm going to try to hit a few more stones before heading back to the States, and that'll be it. So instead of my 30 that I planned, it was going to be 18 or 19, something like that. But he had scheduled a firewood sauna for us and a cold plunge. And I didn't want to do it because I was tired and just wanted to sleep, but I decided to do it. And we went to this thing. It was a sauna, and then you go back from the sauna into the lake, ice cold lake. The sauna felt great. When I tell you, I got into that sauna, and within a minute, the joint pain, the muscle aches, the muscle soreness all went away. It was like magic. But after 10 minutes of spending it in there and then jumping into the river, I felt like a new man, and I went back and forth a few times. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like my own version of cocaine. I feel alive again. And I got back in the right headspace. I'm like, fuck's sake, let's go. I can do this. But not only did I feel like I was back, I felt like I was bigger, better, and faster and stronger than I was on the first day there. When by now I should be done. I should be toast. I should be my weakest. But I wasn't. And I went to my first set of stones, the Faha graveyard stones. And not only did I take advantage of that cold plunge and sauna, but I took warm-ups more serious. I started using my heavy bands, which I didn't because I was so much in a rush to lift stones that I didn't take warm-ups seriously, and they're very important. So I let everybody go before me, get their wind, get their lift, or whatever, while I spent my 10 to 12 minutes warming up with bands with my hips, my biceps, twisting my spine, touching the backs of my palms to the ground till I was ready. And then I would go in for the lifts. And as soon as I lifted the bigger Faha stone that day to my chest, I knew I was ready to kick ass that day. And I got back in the car, and we were going to drive to the next stone, which was about an hour away, Blair Glens. And this whole time in the car, I wasn't crying tears of joy, but I was almost feeling the tears of joy coming because I knew nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to get this stone to my chest. I'm going to be the first fucking person that ever does it. And I'm going to do something big today. And sure as shit, first try, I walked up to that stone. Bam, chest lift. You saw me in the video. I was top of the world. Then after that, I went to Thomas Lonergan. Did the same technique, same lift with that. Bam. Then we had one more stone after that, and that was it for the day. And then the day after that was the Ballingarry cross stone, the one I did on my knees. And I had the same mentality that day. This fucking stone is coming off the ground. I'm going to make sure of it. My Irish ancestors are going to be there for me. They're going to be at my side. I'm going to make them proud. And it happened. So what I'm getting here was I didn't give up there. I could have, I almost did, but I didn't. And sometimes when you're almost ready to give up, you're feeling your lowest is right when the breakthrough is around the corner. That video has 36 million views. Almost. No, it has 36 million views. It's the most viral stone lift of all time. And
wow.
It just goes to show, don't give up.
There's a technique I've been using. I was super depressed when I was in my early 20s. I had a bad breakup and I didn't take it too well. And you're kind of in a new country. So I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. So I came to the States for school. So I read a book. It was called The Traveler's Gift. It's not anything special, but it had a framing of how you would talk to yourself and a certain way that you would get your mental character sort of in check. And ever since then, so I learned that from my granddad. My granddad was like an insurance salesman. And when he was going to study for his exam, he just actually read the entire book. And then he just listened to the book for months in advance. He didn't even read the book. He was sitting and watching TV. He's listening to the book. He's sleeping. He's listening to the book. So just constant, just completely erasing and overwriting his mind. Do you think if you, because this is an idea I'm toying with now. So for athletes coming up for an event, you get a very specific, because you know yourself, right? So it's either you record it or you work with someone to write it and then you record it in your voice. And I think a very specific thing about it is in your voice. So you're talking to yourself and it's almost for every stone, you had a specific mental walkthrough and things that, you might get weak at this point and whatever hype song it might be a friend just saying, fuck John, and all of that. Do you think that will help you in your individual list or on your tour? So imagine you had 30 stones. How many stones do you have coming up on your next tour?
You do 100. Depends on time.
Right. So imagine you had 100 recordings, one for each stone, and in between each stone, like you put in this this thing, and you're like, all right, I'm getting ready. Remember this. So it's almost like you're coaching yourself beforehand. Do you think that has any benefit in what you're about to do or future stuff?
Absolutely. I think it would have benefit for me. I think it would have benefit for other athletes. It's because it's positive reinforcement. And also, if you have experience with, say, a recording of it that you could think of in your own voice or your friend's voice, you know what it did for you in the past. So you know what it could do for you now in the future, in the very distant or very close future.
Yep. Makes sense. So as we get a little closer to the end, do you actually like to exercise? So for instance, like I exercise a fair amount. I don't necessarily like it. Do you actually like to exercise? I'm fascinated by people who actually like to exercise. That's why I asked. Okay.
I crave it. It's like my drug. Big time.
Cool. What's the dream?
Lift as many historical stones as I can until the day I die. And I also have my own personal mission of increasing awareness here in the United States of the tradition of historical stone lifting. However, I would also like to build our own history of stone lifting here in the States so that maybe one day when I'm gone, we have stories of stones here that maybe right now are only modern day lifting stones, but one day, 50 to 100 years from now, they're historical lifting stones. And people from all around travel to go lift them.
That's beautiful. That's exciting. I could just imagine, though, in Arizona, you probably want to make sure there's no snakes under the stone before you go lift it, you know?
Absolutely. Definitely don't want no snakes.
Yeah. Have you ever found weird animals under stones when you went to lift them? Not necessarily the sort of traditional historic ones. I'm sure those are very protected and well used, but you randomly see a cool stone on the side of the road. Have you come across any weird shit under a stone?
I've come across bugs, and I've really just come across bugs. To my surprise, even when I go out to the desert, never have come across a snake. I've seen snakes in 2 states in my life. 3. New York, Illinois, and Florida. Oh, yeah. Never. You would think I'd go see it in Arizona or New Mexico under a rock. Or anywhere. Nope.
Right.
Never.
That's good. You got good omens around you, at least from a venomous perspective.
Yeah.
Are you a big reader?
No, never have been.
All right. So here's my last rapid round of 3 questions. So you're stuck on an island and you have this specialized chef. The chef could cook any meal on the planet. They could fly in things, whatever. You're going to be stuck on this island for the next 10 years. And I'm going to put all the historic rocks on the planet on that island, but you only get 2 meals. What 2 meals will you have that chef cook for you?
Would this be 2 meals every day for the rest of my life, to say?
For the next 10 years. You have a 10-year stone lifting tour, and you get to choose 2 meals, that any possible meal that you want. No limits.
Pepperoni pizza and fried rice.
All right. Okay. Cool. That's vibes. Besides stone lifting, and I guess we didn't talk much about rock climbing, because I do know that you like rock climbing a lot. What's one thing that brings you joy?
Going out in nature and traveling. Another thing to the travel, lift stones, repeat. I also just sometimes travel and repeat without lifting stones. I've been to 49 of the states. Only state I haven't been to is Alaska. I've been to 13 countries. And the majority of those places I've never lifted stones. I just love traveling. And it brings me a lot of joy seeing the world.
Why do you like traveling? What does it do to you?
It just shows me what else is out there in the world. It gives me a new outlook and perspective. Seeing different cultures, seeing different formations. here in Illinois, I got, what are they, cornfields. But when I go to Arizona or something, I see those beautiful rock formations everywhere. I see the Grand Canyon. Or, for instance, I've been to the Caribbeans, Bahamas, and I saw the water there, beautiful. Seen the Eiffel Tower in France. I just love that kind of stuff. I don't know what about it, why, but I just would never be happy staying in the same place. I can't. It's not my DNA.
Yeah, and especially a lot of people. Are you from Illinois originally?
I am actually from Buffalo, New York.
New York,
yeah.
Okay, New York, yeah. A lot of people don't leave the country. Many Americans don't leave the country, so it's cool to see that you've really taken to that. So my last question is not about being famous. It's more from the perspective of sort of like long-term goal setting. So what do you want people to remember about you after you're gone?
I think I would say I would want them to remember me as the guy who traveled state to state, pinning his own modern day lifting stones for others around to go lift, build the history to, and eventually become historic. Like a man named John Cegielski once traveled the world lifting historical stones. However, for his own mission, he traveled state by state, pinning his own stones so that people from all around could go and lift these. Something like that, I think, would be really cool for my grandkids to tell, for other people to tell, and just for it to be a thing here. And yeah.
That's meaningful. And I personally think you can do it. And now, we're in the age of permissionless media. There's a guy called Naval Ravikant. So he has this expose on how to get rich without getting lucky. And two of the things that he highlights is code and media. So you don't need permission to write code and put it out there. You don't need permission to record media and put it out there. So I think that mechanism alone, especially now that you have all of this attention sort of towards you, I think your work, your life's work will have so much more meaning in the end. And the legend of John, I think, will be true, because I might hope, at least in this episode, you've inspired me to look at my own strength in a different dimension. You said you lift nature. That cued in something to me in my mind, because so I'll go surf. So what's kind of cool about surfing is I'm actually riding like an actual waveform in physics. It's just the waveform in the water, but I'm on that waveform. So I can only imagine what it feels like to and there's something about rocks, I guess, that it's the true Zen symbol, because in a lot of Buddhist things, they're just a bunch of rocks on top of each other. So I guess that's actually quite symbolic in terms of how everything is centered. But yeah, man, I have no doubt that there will be a legend of John in the US, and I'm very excited to see what you build out and bring that sport here.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Appreciate the time.